Hello again, Scott here from SocialNRG Presents, and thank you so much for joining us. And this episode is particularly exciting if you know anything about the world of rock and roll and the guitars that bring it to life. Our guest today is Jim Survis, one of the industry's top guitar technicians and a backline specialist and personal assistant for some of the most recognized bands in the business. Jim's list of credits include working both in studio and touring internationally with a long list of rock royalty, including Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, Lenny Kravitz, Johnny Lang, Foreigner, Van Halen, and Kiss, among many, many others. Jobs in this industry really don't come much sweeter than this, resulting in several platinum records for his work on various client albums. Jim has also worked on 3 Super Bowl halftime shows, as well as the Grammys and the Academy Awards. And today, Jim joins us from his home in beautiful Florida to talk about his exciting career and bring us up to speed on what he's working on next. So sit back, relax, and get ready, as SocialNRG now presents you with your Backstage Pass.
Great, fantastic. Let's bring up Jim and get him into our little, out of the waiting room and into our show.
All right. Here he comes.
Fantastic. Okay, so, man, we got to start. Last time I saw you was in Vegas when you were with Kiss.
Refresh me. I vaguely remember, but
that was probably 6 years ago. I'm thinking. Okay. Weren't they doing a residency there for a while, and you were running?
That's right. Yeah. Residency at the old Hard Rock Hotel. That's
right. Yeah, and we the night before you were kind enough to bring me backstage and show us. There was a bunch of us there, 2 or 3 friends of ours. I think Larry McLisher might have been there too.
Oh, okay.
And we were looking around at all the gear and stuff and going through some of the, the blow-up guitar and all. That was fun. It was really fun. And the show, of course, Kiss always has such a great stage show. I mean, they're all about the spectacle.
Yeah. Those guys, they kind of wrote the book on it.
Yeah, no kidding. I remember
I completely forgot about that for some reason, and now I'm like, oh yeah, we did do the show and tell one night.
Oh yeah, well you're so busy all the time. Well, before COVID hit, what was the last thing you were working on?
Well, I'm working for Guns N' Roses now.
Right.
But, tentatively when they get back to work, I'm part of their team, and that's what I've been doing the last little while. I kind of had Lenny Kravitz and Guns N' Roses together, and I was juggling. And then I had to kind of just jump over. It was too much to keep juggling. So I ended up going with GNR full time.
Well, I remember working with GNR in Sweden, and I've never seen that many Les Pauls in one spot in my life. There was more Les Pauls in that guitar coffin than there was at Long and McQuaid.
Yeah, he's got a few. I'm actually doing Richard Fortus, the other guitar player in Guns. Although I have worked for Slash, and I spent a couple years with them, that's not my job on GNR. I got Fortus, the other guy.
Well, is Slash back in GNR now?
Oh yeah. It's the front line. It's Slash, Duff, Axl, Dizzy, original keyboard player.
Oh right, I did read about that. Yeah. So
there's a different drummer, but it's a very intact band.
Wow. And Axl's behaving himself?
I heard a story that a lot of that was in the press so much that that's kind of the first thing that people tend to ask you. But somebody told me that when he subbed in for AC/DC, they're very, very businesslike, and it wasn't his outfit. He was just pleased to be there, and it was a bunch of fun for him. So somebody else was making the rules. I guess he got on a schedule with those guys and really enjoyed it.
I know. I remember hearing about that. Everybody was shocked that he showed up on time. In fact, he was ahead of time.
Yeah, no, he's like the first guy up there when we do GNR shows. He's got a quick change that's really decked out, and he'll go up there like 20 minutes early and do some cardio. He's got some cardio machines in there, and just kind of, do some yelling and screaming. And now he's like the first guy.
I remember back, maybe it's still happening, when we worked with Guns N' Roses, and it was an outdoor show at, have you done Sweden Rocks?
Yes.
Yeah. And, that whole backstage area. And the guys from Guns N' Roses had a bubble hockey game that traveled with them.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, and it had its own road case, like this this gigantic road case. And we said, "You got bubble hockey?" He said, "Oh yeah, it's in our contract. We don't go anywhere without our bubble hockey."
Yeah. They roll pretty large. It's a lot. It's mostly stadiums with those guys in a world where there's hardly any stadium bands left. Those guys still are able to do stadiums. Yeah.
Thing. So, okay, so you were working with Guns N' Roses, and so another question. So, how are you surviving this whole being off work thing? What are you doing with yourself?
That's a good question. It's been entertaining and, well, to say the least. I've been, trying to. It's weird. Psychologically, it's weird. I kind of joined the circus when I was a teenager, and it's been all this movement since. Road trip. Never at home, and trip after trip after trip after trip. It's been my whole life until now. Much later, and so mentally, it was a little weird, not always being on the move.
Yeah, no kidding. Because I mean, I'm looking at the people that you've worked with. It seems like you must like finish a tour and then you're called to the next tour to work with somebody else. It must be like almost instantaneous.
Well, not always, but that's what you're kind of striving for with a little bit of sanity time in between, but. And sometimes, if you get a good call and it doesn't quite fit your schedule, you're probably going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
To do it. So sometimes the timing's not perfect timing or whatever. And I remember having discussions with my, wife at the time, and should I do this? And we make the decision together, and she was real supportive. So I always kind of did it. Really worked, go get it.
Well, it becomes, well, here's the story. It's like, oh man, I'm really, really busy. Oh my God, I can't do that. It's Paul McCartney. Okay, I'll be right there. All right. I'll be on the next plane.
Yeah, well, he's, it's funny because he, with us, it's he's in the highest echelon, but with me, it's always like feast or famine. Like you're either stacked to the gills or like, oh, geez, there's a hole in my calendar. What am I going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually saw something online, Ringo talking about it. I think it was on Howard Stern, saying that McCartney was the workaholic in the Beatles. It wasn't John or any of the other guys.
Yeah.
It was Paul, who was very eager and super motivated and had a lot of ideas in his head that needed to make it out of there. And
yep.
Yeah.
Those guys, it's like, I think Ringo's line was, John and I'd be sitting around the pool, having a bevy, and all of a sudden Paul would go, well, lads, we got to get back to work.
Yeah. There's always one guy, right?
Yeah. So, well, it goes to show, I mean, how much product he's put out, for better or for worse, in all fairness. But he never stops working, the guy. I mean, he just doesn't. He loves what he does. It's almost like, I remember Randy Bachman had said, there was in an interview once, that it was quite brilliant and revealing, because somebody said to him, what would you be doing with yourself if you weren't a successful singer-songwriter? He says, I'd be an unsuccessful singer-songwriter. You do what you love. You're not in it for the money. If you're in it for the money, you're in it for the wrong reasons. You do it because it's in your heart.
That's right. And here's Paul McCartney, who's living in a castle somewhere, eager to get into Apple Studios and, eat lunch off the counter and get some of his songs recorded. He had all the luxury and still would rather be at the studio,
Yeah, exactly. Well, apparently during the Let It Be sessions, he used to ride the bus to Abbey Road. The city bus. Remember, he had the beard and he liked the fact he'd dress in the top coat and have a beard, and he'd take the bus to Abbey Road and nobody knew who he was.
A good one.
I know. He's always, his kids went to regular school. They went to public school. He didn't want them in private schools. He's lived such a normal life. It's incredible.
Well, that's
considering who he is.
Yeah, because, I'm sure he gave his kids a grounded reality. Like his parents gave him, it's funny how you see that passed down. And Paul Stanley is kind of that guy too. He's, his parents taught him work ethic and, a humble beginning and don't waste money and all the lessons. And they sunk in, and you see him teaching his kids that. And he's not he doesn't run around town just, throwing money around like nothing. He's, I think his quote was, he goes, anybody can make money. It's keeping money that's
Isn't that true, eh? It's so true. I mean, Brent Knudsen has said the same thing to me. It's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep.
Yeah.
Very true. I was going to say, you were talking about Paul Stanley, and I was shocked. He's one of those voices that you never realize how good a singer he is. And then I saw him do a Broadway show back about, it had to be 15 years ago. And he was on TV doing this Broadway thing, and I was going, holy crap, that guy can sing. I had no idea. You're so used to Kiss, like the circus, and he's really an incredible singer.
Yeah, he's very talented all around. He's a good example of, he's not Van Halen on guitar, but he's a singing frontman who was doing it way before there was in-ear monitors and having to yell over pyro and loud guitar and loud bass and he's old school. And that guy's got endurance. I mean, at his age. And I believe that he's had every single, like both hips, both shoulders. I think his knees are done. Maybe all of those joints from working as much as he has over the years. And he runs out there and still, kicks his.
Yeah. There was.
Spins around.
Yeah. When I saw the show, it was like when I saw them in 1977. It was the same,
Yeah. No, he's in excellent condition. He's in better shape than I am, and he's older.
What was I going to say about what was his big line? You seen the rest, now see the best, or whatever. He said that line every time their show starts. It's like their cattle call. But I want to take you back a bit. So you were born and raised where? Was it Nanaimo?
No, I went to Canada as a kid. My father was a Canadian, and him and my mother split up when I was a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed with my mom. And then when I was 10 years old, I went to live with my dad.
And your dad?
And he lived in Kamloops. He was a musician and now a retired doctor. And when I was 10, I went up there, and that was my introduction to Canada.
So your dad was he was a doctor who also played in a band?
No, he's a classical musician. He's a violinist.
Oh, wow.
Symphony guy, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So you definitely had music in your background. And so you must have started playing guitar or something at a young age. Is that correct?
No. It's funny. He was forgive me, Father, but he was a stuffy classical musician who was not going to have that in his house.
Wow.
That kind of nonsense and noise emanating from his house. He was practicing, the schedule of a serious musician, and his wife, my stepmother, was a classical pianist. So they were at it all day, all the time. And,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They just thought, what I was interested in was noise. So I wasn't afforded, I was told I could pick a band instrument for school band. And I had a record. You ever hear of a guy called Mo Kaufman?
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, the Bach to rock guy.
Yeah.
There was a record that somebody had in the house of that guy, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I took flute because it was super small and light. My stepbrother had French horn, which was super heavy.
Right.
So I took flute, and I was the only boy in the all-girl flute section, so that was a plus.
Hey, Scott on our panel has a question.
What's
Hey,
that?
Jim. So if your folks or your dad and stepmom were classically trained and all that, did they not consider the other realms of music or worthy, or like at what point did they sort of say, wow, Jim's actually finally cued into something that's really kind of worthwhile?
Never. But I didn't live with him for a real long time, and I was out as a young teenager, and that's when I made my way to Nanaimo, getting back on track of our story a little bit.
Okay.
It was originally when I was 10, I came to Kamloops, where my father worked at the hospital there, and then shortly thereafter, I was in Nanaimo. I have an older sister who married a guy in the Neuse Bay, and they had a small farm there in the Neuse Bay. And I was a teenager having a tough time, and my older sister said, "Hey, come live with us." So I did, and that's when I entered the business, when I got to Vancouver Island and Nanaimo.
So who'd you work with first?
Well,
Were you playing in a band, or were you?
No, at this point, I love music. I don't play anything. I'm an air drummer. I'm an air, I'm a history buff with music, but I don't play anything. And I'm about, by the time I get to Nanaimo, I'm around 15, almost 16 years old. And I meet a girl who I go crazy head over heels with. And when I get to Nanaimo, and her older sister was dating a guy who and that guy was Rob Becker.
Okay.
And Rob had a band, a professional band that had a truck and lights and sound equipment and a crew, and they played a lot.
Do you remember the name of that band?
Windjammer.
Oh, okay. Okay, I remember that. I remember that name. I never saw them, but I remember the name.
Yeah, Windjammer, and so he had this band, and they were just in the point of breaking up Windjammer and starting a pop new wave kind of band, because that's what was all the rage in late '79 or '80 when I met all these crazy folks and was introduced to my new business in life. But it's around 1980, and they learn a bunch of Joe Jackson songs, and they change the name to the Urge, and it's all guys that Glenn Dooley and Gordie Allen,
right?
And we hit the road, and I was a underage kid with a fake ID, and kind of a runaway almost, and nowhere to really turn. And I just kind of, it became my career, but it also became my bros and my family. I didn't really have anything else.
Yeah, it's like a carny lifestyle.
It's a carny lifestyle, and and you're out there with a bunch of brothers, and you're all in the same boat.
Yeah, if you're not sleeping in a hotel, you're sleeping in the back of a truck or a van.
Yeah, wherever you had to go, and it seemed all fine, Yeah. At that point, nobody was really worried about it. We were all just living and having a good time.
I spent quite a bit of time going back and forth to towns across the prairie, sleeping on Sir and Vega cabinets. Remember those? that was my bed in the back of the van.
Oh man! I hope you had a piece of foam or something on there.
Actually, we didn't for a while. And then we had a trailer, but the trailer only held so much. And then it wasn't until we finally got a crew in a real truck that we actually converted our van to something that you could actually sleep in. But boy, it was uncomfortable for a while. Thank God it was only 18. So
right. You're on top of the world playing music and getting better at your craft.
Absolutely, yeah. We were all bulletproof, but luckily for me, my band Shama was probably the most dedicated band. There was absolutely drugs, no way, booze, no way. Wow. Working out, I remember one time we were playing, we'd finally worked our way, because we didn't want to play in Vancouver until we came in on Gilded Wings type of thing, because we wanted Bruce Allen as our manager. That was our goal. So we stayed around the prairies for, quite a while, a couple of years, 2.5 years, until we become so big that when we played Vancouver, we played the Body Shop. Remember that place?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
for you when you got there, that's what you were trying to do.
Yeah. And of course, Bruce Allen was front row center very first night, and he called us into his office. So it worked. But I remember going to play the Body Shop one night, and we all just dressed in white. It was white everything. Our amps were white. The lights on stage were white. There was white carpeting. Everything was white. And the reason we did it was for the lighting. It made it look really good. For one thing, you knew when the band entered the room, for one thing. So you got that professional air. But also, when you put blue lights on, that whole stage was blue. And it looked like you had this incredible light show, when really we didn't, comparatively. But I remember I was putting on my pants, and Brian Armstrong, our drummer, walked up. He goes, Oh, Mick, you got a crease in your jeans. You want to iron those, please? Like, we were that stringent. It was like I remember Jeff Neal, who's now in Street Art. I remember Jeff Neal coming up. He's after the first set. He said, "Hey, Mick, you kicked your leg during that song in the first set." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Save your move. Wait till later on in the night. You don't want to give away all your moves right away." We were so focused on where we were going. It was like we would discuss the show every night. When we finished, we'd go back to the hotel and discuss the show. There was no partying. That band did not party.
Better than everybody.
Yeah. Well, it was a good band at the time for sure.
Yeah. I actually remember getting back to the Urge band. I remember that when I first met you, the very first time, it was in Nanaimo, and there was that gig called Sebastian's, which was the converted church.
Yeah. And the stage looked like an altar.
The stage was where the altar used to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were setting up in there, and you were in the A room across town about 3 or 4 blocks.
Oh.
And you walk down there just to stick your head in the door and maybe see somebody that you knew or something. But I remember it was about 1980.
Yeah, well, so that must have been when they opened up when maybe Herb opened up that club across the street. It was like in a strip mall or something. Because I think Herb Kessler was the guy who brought Shama. We played Sebastian's. That was our first gig in Nanaimo.
Okay.
And then the next time, I think he had left and he started his own club. So I think I just went over to see what was going on at Sebastian's, and you guys were there.
Right, yeah, and you were at Shuffles.
No, I don't think it would have been Shuffles then. I think it was another place. There was another place that they had for a bit.
Yeah, I know the other one too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a weird name. I can't remember what it was called.
Downstairs.
No, that was Rascals.
Okay.
There was Rascals, Shuffles, and there was this other place. They always had to have an apostrophe S. Every club ended with an apostrophe S.
Right. Right. Every band and every club.
Yeah, no kidding. But so now what launches you to what you would say is the big time? Where you, I know it's all incremental steps. You work with one band, this leads to another. But
yeah, but there was definite some breakthrough, pivotal moments that happened and gave me momentum and in my career. But so I kind of messed around with little bands around Vancouver scene for 4 or 5 years, plugging around in the circuit, we both know it well. And then
what was your job then? Were you running sound?
I'd drive the truck, set everything up, and operate lights.
Okay.
I was a light guy.
Okay.
But I also would always set up all the backline too for my extra, $100 a week. The band would kick in, so I just set up everything, right?
Well, just something to interject here, because this is going to be this show is going out around the world. But back in those days, you could make a living playing the clubs.
Absolutely.
Like in the early 80s, I remember by that time I was out of Shama and into Trauma, and there were so many. I never had to go on the road. People said, "Oh, it must have been hard on your family." I said, well, my family, are you kidding? The kids would go to bed and Dad would be home. I'd leave after they went to bed, go play at 10 o'clock. The kids would wake up in the morning, Dad's home. It was like they thought like I never worked. And luckily there was so much work that when they would ask us to go to Vancouver Island or go to, let's say, the Okanagan, I would use that when the kids were on school holidays. So it became a paid vacation.
Right.
And I'd bring a babysitter. The babysitters would usually come for free because whatever we were doing was so much fun.
Right.
So Charles, maybe you could look this up for me. Now, back then, like I remember back in the early 80s, I was taking a wage of $500 a week. Do you remember how much you were making as a crew guy?
In the early 80s when I started?
Yeah.
When I started, I was making $0.
Right, of course.
And they'd throw me a little bit of, buy me a burger or whatever when we were, so it was just kind of scraping along with no money, but really not caring, could care less if I had no money. And then shortly thereafter, 2 months into my career, I went from $0 to $100 a week.
Right. And then, so let's say we're looking around, now that's probably 1980, right?
That would be 1980 when I entered the biz. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say around 83, 84. By 83, 84, are you still in the clubs or are you off?
Yes. Yeah.
So 83, 84, you were making probably substantially more, like 200 maybe?
No, what I did was I bought some lights.
Smart.
And I became the lighting subcontractor, and I owned all the lighting equipment. So that often gets you into trouble because now you're making more than the band. Not in every case, and maybe not in Trauma, but in my band, later on when I had the light show, and especially after I had it all paid off and everything, you're doing pretty good because you'd pull a salary, by then around, $300 or whatever your salary was. And then your lighting rental had to be, $400 or whatever. So even back then I was, I found a way to kind of squeeze it for a little more than the regular.
So with your lighting rig and your wages, let's say you're pulling in $600-700 a week.
Yeah, easy.
So what's that in today's dollars, Charles? Canadian.
Let me see if I can do
Well,
that.
actually, make it American money. What would that be in American money? From Canadian to American in these days' wage. I think that might be interesting.
Going there.
I know.
17 cents an hour.
Exactly. So what was the wage in the 80s?
Well,
$800.
Okay, all right.
but the
You guys
reason
go ahead
I'm
and this is going to take half a second.
that's okay. We'll keep talking. Just interject when you want.
All right.
So, because the reason I'm saying that is because I remember down in the States when, the LA bands, this is back when Van Halen were breaking. I remember the big thing was bands in the States, which is kind of the way it is here now, would almost have to play in a club. They would be, if you wanted to play in like the Troubadour, or you wanted to play in whatever club down in LA, you had to go out and sell the tickets and all that stuff. And the money you made was 50% of the ticket sales you did. And that's the only way you could survive. Whereas in Canada, the guys in bands were owning houses. Look at what you got. You bought a lighting rig. You're making $700 a week. $800 a week. So there was a lot of money to be made in the club business up here, and you really didn't even have to go on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I did. You didn't have to because your band was better than everybody else's. I worked for some great bands, but you guys were the top cream of the crop, so you could pick and choose more than other bands that weren't cream of the crop. Necessarily, we would all have to, you're going to have to go do your 12 weeks out in, Alberta and Saskatchewan if you want to do a swing through the lower mainland. And, and you do it because that's what the agency told you. And you got to hand it to those, Sam Feldman and Bruce Allen and their vision. The way that whole Western Canada circuit was set up, there was, we were all making money. We were making moves and having homes and kids and
And they were making the lion's share of it because, of course, at the time, I wasn't all that aware of it. But not only were we paying, we paid 10% because we negotiated it down, but most bands were paying 15% commission.
Right.
But the nightclubs who had Feldman bands were also paying a 15% commission
to be part of the
Feldman roster. Right. So they were making a crap load of money. Right. And of course, Sam and Bruce had split partnership. Bruce Allen and Sam Feldman, and they were both so Bruce is managing Loverboy at this time, and Bryan Adams, what's his name, Tom Cochrane, Red Rider, all these bands are out there, and he's making his money as a manager, and Sam's running the agency, but they're splitting everything 50-50. It was the best divorce on earth.
Yeah, there's tons of money in both.
It was the best divorce on earth. They split everything 50-50 and kept the lawyers out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good on them. That must be a deep Jacques Cousteau bank account.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so let's take you out of the nightclubs now. So you've done well. Yeah. So sorry. Go ahead, Charles.
So just back to the question that you guys had, $700 back in the 80s would be $2,200 a week now. So that's sort of what you're talking about. It's great money. And I was going to say to Jim, I love how entrepreneurial you became. And it's, I'm wondering if that's led to an aspect of your success, like doing the lighting piece, because that's a very smart entrepreneurial move. And now you're making more than the band.
And that actually plays to what Mark DeFrance was saying about you have to be able to diversify what you're able to do. You have to, I can't remember the term you used, Mick, though, where you have to look how you're going to build a business in a sense.
Yeah, I don't even know if I thought about it much. It was like the guy before me had a bunch of gear and he was doing it and he left. So I said, yeah, I'll buy your stuff. And then I figured out somebody I could borrow some money off of. And it just kind of happened. And then it wasn't until it was happening that I really realized the fruits of what I had done. You know, I'm out in Alberta with with this band, and everybody's mad at you because, after they pay all the bills, they don't have a lot of change left. And I don't know. So, but once that's that kind of phase was done, I kept the lights and I subbed them out with a friend of mine who was also a lighting guy in the bars like I was. And he kept that thing working for many years afterwards, after I had already kind of flown the nest and was doing other kind of, gigs where I, wasn't needing lights anymore.
Right.
So what's okay, so let's take it from there. You have the lights going on. And now, are you saying that you sold the lights to this next guy, or did he rent them out on your behalf?
I owned them. I still own the lights in the little company that I had. And this guy was kind of my manager, and he would go out with my gear and I'd send it out as a package, and it worked. It's worked a lot.
Well, we used to spend a tremendous amount of money between Ryder trucks and what was it, a Rocky Mountain Sound and right. Guy Scott's with his lighting. Our lighting costs. I mean, we were making. I think Trauma was making about $4,250 a week. We paid 10% commission, so that's $425, whatever it is in commission. And then we'd be spending between the truck and the lighting and stuff. I think it was like $2,200 a week in that stuff alone. Yeah. So there was a lot of money being made by everybody because of that music business. And clubs were packed 7 nights or 6 nights a week back then.
I can't believe how packed it was. I mean, it just, times have changed, and there was no internet to keep people busy at home, or everything is kind of different. But yeah, it was a really fertile time, and I'm so glad, because I don't know where I would have fit in hadn't this come into accidentally into my life, this doing this business. But I around 84 or 85 I got a job with Trooper.
Oh, okay.
And that was my first band that I had worked with that had like a real record out. So
that Mark LaFrance would have been playing drums with them.
I started right after Mark left, like really early at that seam. I think Ronnie Barron was the next drummer after Mark.
Right, correct.
And that's when I came in.
Okay, cool.
So and that was a big shift for me, going from what I had been doing for the last 4 or 5 years to what I was about to be doing. The real segue, because we would play one-offs and special nights in the bar or whatever. It wasn't quite arenas or super big venues yet, so I was able to grow with it. It didn't get away on me.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Charles. I got your note. I was going to say, now I want, before we get into we got a gallery of pictures that you sent us, but we'll get into that later, because there's still some ground to cross. So from Trooper in those days, they weren't quite in their heyday anymore. Their heyday was probably 1979 to 1981 in there.
Right. It was, we were in the trenches working.
Right. So but the big shows are probably still out in the Maritimes.
Yeah, there was big shows, but we filled all the little cracks with little shows.
Right, of course. And they still do that. God bless them. They're still one of my favorite live bands. I love Ray and Smitty.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so from Trooper, what's the next step? What's the next step up the rung?
Well, Trooper, I kind of sharpened some new skills, because now I'm doing lights and backline, but the back line is more. It's for a real guitar player, and who's been around and played a lot of arenas. And so Smitty kind of took me in under his wing, and really, I knew nothing, and I could play You Smoke on the Water on guitar, maybe if I tried real hard, biting on my tongue while I was doing it. But at that point, you know, but Smitty kind of showed me how to handle, you know, he had some Les Pauls and a Strat. He showed me how to handle them. He showed me how to handle his old Marshall Super Lead 100 and his cabinets and pedal board. And that was my first rig, was his rig. And I would set him up, set the drums up, and operate lights and drive the truck. That was my job with Trooper. But I got better at guitar teching and drum teching.
How do you become a guitar tech when you don't play the instrument yourself?
It's weird. I kind of, it's weird. I didn't play the instrument. I knew a few chords, you know, I knew, you know, really didn't play it though. And I know guys at a high level that don't play guitar, and I think that they're handicapped if they don't, you know, speak the language, so to speak. But
I have an idea about that, because one of the things about a crew guy who's a guitar tech usually is a disgruntled guitar player who wishes he was in the limelight. And I think a guy like you, who's actually there to do a job for the guy, I think it would keep you more focused. I notice a lot of times, and you see this in almost every club, every concert, wherever there's, let's say if it's a big enough band in a club where they've got a guitar tech, the guitar tech goes up there and does all of his greatest licks for the crowd before the band goes on stage, because that's their chance to get their yayas out. A guy like you wouldn't be doing that.
You know, have I Zeppelin riffed a crowd or two in my days?
You got to do what you got to do. So you've learned to play by osmosis over the years, obviously.
It's weird, yeah. I never was a guitar player who couldn't cut it and became a guitar tech. I was a guitar tech or a crew guy who was super enthusiastic about music and had some ability that didn't realize had some ability, and then just slowly started playing stuff because it was around. And you know, now I can kind of fake it on a few different instruments, and just from being around. And,
well, your dad, I mean, there's no doubt you have it in your blood.
Yeah, my dad's a top-notch musician, so yeah, and there could be a little going on, but I always tell people I'm the best musician you've ever heard that's never practiced a day in his life. Is your dad still with us, by the way? Yeah, he's out in Ontario, and he's locked down. He's in a home, and he's been in there, but at least he's got his instrument to keep him busy, and he's in his 80s, and arthritis and nothing has kicked in, so he's actually told me he's playing better than he ever has in his life.
Wow. And isn't that incredible?
Yeah, so I'm completely amazed that, you know, because you'd expect him to have diminished by now somewhat, at least.
Speaking of guitar, I see a Gibson in the background. What is that? I just see the headstock.
Oh, you'd like this.
Oh, it's a J160. Oh, fantastic. Oh, yeah. The John Lennon special. I love it.
Oops.
Oh, yeah. That's a great guitar. You know what? I had one, and what I did was, because it's got the P190 pickup in the neck position, right?
The P90, yeah.
And that's the sound of I Feel Fine. That opening off, that's that guitar through a Vox amp.
Oh, it is.
That's why it's such a unique sound. You plug that in, or actually, it doesn't even have to be a Vox. Any amp, you plug that in and play that riff, that's the sound.
Because the P90 that came with the J160E is the same P90 that came in your SG or whatever. It's
correct.
Exactly the same pickup. There wasn't an acoustic and an electric variation. It was just the P90 they stuck in, and I love the sound of this guitar. I always prefer a magnetic pickup over any kind of PZO thing. They sound a little.
I put a piezo in mine, and I used, and what I would do is I turned the tone control. So I turned my volume into a stacked thing. So I pull it up for the tone, right? The volume on it. And the second one, the second tone control on the J160 was the volume for the piezo. So I had an acoustic sound and that P90 sound that I could use whenever I wanted.
Blended, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good idea. I sold the guitar, sadly, but it was a good idea. Anyway, so so now from Trooper, where do you go from there?
Oh boy. From Trooper, I went to Tim Bachman's BTO.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. That was with Rick Fedek and Jim Robinson.
It was pre those guys when I got there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We ran around. It was right after BTO, the intact real band did the Van Halen tour, 5150 with Leslie West as a special guest and everything. It was
right. And
then they finished that tour, and then Tim went out with a fragmented version of the band, and that's what I was doing for. That's
right, because Tim was called back up from the minor leagues to play with Randy again.
Right. Yeah, he had played on the original records. Before they got Blair Thornton. So, yeah, he's an original member.
I know. I was just talking yesterday about how Blair Thornton's the luckiest guy on earth. He got called in for their biggest album. He's been retired ever since. That was the luckiest move ever. He was playing in a club band in Vancouver.
That was a lottery win for him.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. Unbelievable. So, okay. So you went to, I was wondering, because I remember Randy knows you. Did you ever work for Randy as well?
I never worked for Randy directly, but I met him during those years when I met started working for his brother, and I had met him, and then we just bumped into each other here, there, and everywhere over the years. And I've always been a fan of his and a guitar enthusiast,
well, you may not remember this, but in 2004, you were out with Aerosmith, and you guys were in Saskatoon, and your tour buses were parked in front of the Besborough Hotel. And I was with Randy doing a jazz tour, playing all these little jazz clubs across Canada, playing upright bass. And we all had breakfast. Me, you, Randy, at some little restaurant place in.
Remember.
You remember that? Yeah, in Saskatoon. Remember that, but you don't remember Vegas, huh?
Come on, it's Vegas. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, but anyway, so from Tim Bachman, and now you were never working in the band when Rick Fedek or Jim Robinson played, I guess. Yeah,
Jim and Rick and Mike.
Oh, right, Mike was there too.
Yeah, it's funny because the last batch of guys he had decided to split, and Tim didn't really know anybody, so I helped him find Mike Kelly for the Blair Thornton spot, because he's a strong singer, good rhythm, guitar player, looks good, everything you want. So I brought Mike in and introduced him to Tim, and then Mike in turn brought Jim and Rick Fedek in.
Okay, fair enough.
It was a perfect choice because it was a really great little solid band, and we ran. There was no casinos or any of that stuff back then. So you're playing like state fairs, and
right. Yeah. Now Rick's gone on to be drummer for Paul Rogers. So
I've seen him out doing that gig a couple of times. It's funny. He plays like
Bonham.
Yeah, he plays like Bonham, but he's a little like Simon Kirke. So I know why Paul likes him.
Yeah.
Rick's doing good.
Oh, I love Rick. He's one of my favorite guys on earth, and he's an incredibly dedicated drummer. I love. Well, of course, whenever we get together, we have to do Led Zeppelin, because I do a fairly passable Robert Plant, so we always have a lot of fun doing that stuff.
Right.
But so anyway, so now that brings us. So now Tim Bachman the Tim Bachman version of BTO, and now where do you go? How did you get to the next one?
Well, I'm running around with him for a while, and then
for a while. What do you say? Like a year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, a couple of years.
Okay.
And then I get back to Vancouver, and I get the Headpins gig.
Oh. Now, was Bernie in the band?
Excuse me?
Was Bernie in the band with the Headpins, or was that?
Yeah.
Because there was a point where they didn't have Bernie. They had Mark Craney.
Right.
From Gino Vanelli's band.
Right. So I got the Headpins gig. And I was doing those guys for a while until Brian got diagnosed, and we were up in I think we were in Edmonton or Calgary, Edmonton. And got that news, and then we all just went home.
I know, I was really sad. But I remember Brian and I and Jeff Neal, we had it was like an oversexed jam. It was called Sailor's Beat, named after Brian's dog that lived on his boat. Now, for all of our listeners and viewers or whatever, Brian McLeod from the Headpins and Chilliwack had this boat called the Grand Marnier that he parked down on Granville Island. And on that boat, now this is back before digital, so it wasn't a computer. He actually had a complete studio on his boat. And it was locked.
Tape, salt water.
I know. It was like unbelievable. And he got the demos he did out of there were so strong. But anyway, so he was asked to put a band together for Wednesday night jams with Steve. I love Steve, wonderful guy. But he used to walk around in the tuxedo announcing everybody that came in the door. Everybody was a star in his clubs. If he knew your name, you were a star.
Good
yeah.
energy.
But anyway, so Brian enlisted me and Jeff Neal to do this thing called Sailor's Beat on Wednesday night. And it was this wonderful thing. And I was so happy. I'm sorry, I'm going off at a bit of a tangent here, but it's a good story. So remember Night Moves magazine? It was like a monthly periodical. It was almost like Rolling Stone magazine for the Vancouver area.
Yeah, I kind of remember that.
And so Club Soda, the club that we're playing, bought out a huge one-page ad on the back of the magazine. That's prime real estate on this magazine. Every Wednesday night at Club Soda, Sailor's Beat, featuring picture Brian McLeod, Chilliwack Headpins, boom, picture Jeff Neal, Streetheart, Shama, and boom, my picture, and Nick Felizowski. Not even Mick. It was Nick Felizowski. So I walk in now. Steve, for all you people, Steve looked like an axe murderer. Lovely, lovely guy, but he looked like if you saw him out on the street, you'd walk the other way because he's just a scary-looking individual. But I walk into Club Soda early for this jam because I'm so excited to see this ad, and I look, and I'm just heartbroken because they didn't even get my first name right. And so I walk in the back office, and Steve's sitting at the desk, and I walk in, and he goes, "Mick, come here." So I walk up, he goes, "Mick, I talked to Night Moves magazine, and they assured me, and he knows my last name, and he's very proud of being able to say it. He says, and they assured me that they knew how to spell Mick Della Vicenza. I saw it. It came out. I was appalled. I phoned up Night Moves magazine, and I said, you're going to be hearing from my friend Mick." I'm going, that's it? Like, what am I going to do? You put a horse's head in their bed or something? Anyway, so the reason I tell you that, so Brian McLeod wanted to do a reenactment of that, but by that time, Jeff Neal was busy with Jimmy Barnes in Australia. So I said, well, let's get Brent Knudsen. So Brian had got this gig out at, remember the old, it was a Fun Palace in Abbotsford. Remember that gig?
Sure do.
Yeah. And so we were asked to do a week out at the Fun Palace in Abbotsford. Brian was going to play drums, and I'm going to play bass. Brent's going to play guitar. And so I said, well, what are we calling ourselves? He says, the Foreskins. I said, what? I said, well, for one thing, there's only 3 of us, and we're playing in the Bible Belt. He says, yeah, won't it look great on the marquee? So we're called the Foreskins, and the whole idea was the audience had to drink enough to see the fourth guy.
Right.
And so we would be doing songs, and Brian was a fantastic drummer. I mean, he played drums on a lot of Chilliwack stuff. He was not only a great guitar player, but man. And so So we'd be playing a song, and all of a sudden the drums would stop playing. Now, the rule is if drums stop, there might be a problem. You don't want to draw attention to it, so you keep looking at the audience. You don't want to look back in shock. So I'm looking at the audience, hoping maybe Brian's got to fix his bass pedal, his bass drum pedal. And I'm playing and playing. I look, no, McLeod's over at the bar getting shooters for everybody in the band. In the middle of a song, he just stops playing, walks over to the bar, grabs a tray of shooters, and brings them back to us, and he's holding them. It was the most. We broke all the house records in that place. We had the house records until the day it folded. There was probably the most amount of drinking any band has ever done, and of course the house was paying for it. They were just so proud to have Brian McLeod there.
Right, right. You could do anything. That's why he got up off the drums.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Fantastic guitar player, and I loved his inflection of guitar on all that kind of stuff. You can hear him doing hi-hat moves on his guitar. You know, that whole
yeah.
You know, that McLeod trademark thing that he does. It's the same as
yeah, you're right. You're right.
It's the same move. He's thinking like a drummer, and it was so syncopated and so in time and back. Nothing was in a hurry, and yeah, it was great.
Well, I love Steele, McLeod, and Prisoner too. I mean, that's a band that should have gone somewhere. I love their original material. Dave Steele is one of the greatest singers of all time.
Yeah.
And sadly went nowhere. But anyway, so now we're with the Headpins, and so from there, where do you go? How does it graduate out of that school?
Boy, this is going to take 7 hours. This interview.
I bet. Okay, well let's cut to the chase. Where because now we've sort of worked our way up into the upper echelon of Canadian rock, but there's going to be a time where now all of a sudden
a higher echelon.
Yeah, like the international. Where do you cross over into the big international acts?
Well, I ran around with Headpins, and then did a little quick minute with Paul Jans and some of these other people around Vancouver that were kind of making it. All the time, still renting my lights. All the time, doing bar gigs if I got a call to do that. I don't know if you know Jody Perpick, Brian Adams.
Of course, yeah.
So him and I he'd do sound and I'd do lights, and we had this bar band. And when he was off the road from doing arenas with Adams, him and I would be, standing on a milk crate in the back of a bar doing sound and lights, right? So we were all just trying to keep working, even the guys like him who had, supposedly made it. Did those, Headpins, and then I got the Loverboy gig.
Oh.
And
well, that would make sense.
Yeah, and I got it in the studio. So it was my first step in the door of Little Mountain. And they were doing a greatest hits, and there was 5 new songs that were going to be recorded, which a few were going to get chosen to go on this greatest hits record. And so I got to go in there and do a record with Bob Rock with Loverboy as one of my first times in a recording studio.
You gotta love that. So
it was like, damn. And I mean, Rock hadn't done all the great things that he had, done later, but it was kind of neat seeing a guy who was coming up from, being an engineer and a good player and about to turn the corner into international fame. But I got the Loverboy gig, and I kind of monkeyed around with those guys for a while. And then I got the Gino Vanelli gig, and did him a little bit.
Oh man, that's the best live sound I've ever heard in my life. Was Ross, his brother, still running sound?
No, Ross had gone, but getting back, Jody from Bryan Adams, was the front of house engineer.
Oh,
so him and I did that together, and if you've ever heard Adams, you know how great he sounds.
Yes.
So so we got the Gino Vanelli gig, and I got to know Jody pretty good, and then from that, Jody recruited me for Bryan Adams. So now I'm starting to work with Canadian bands, but they're on the international level.
Right.
I've gotten now, I'm not more than just regional or Canada only bands. I'm starting to and now I can taste it. Like, I'm like, shit, you know, if a guy really applied himself, you know,
Right.
you know, at certain points, you're not, really qualified to apply for certain gigs, but now I'm not afraid to try for anything.
Right.
You know, all you can do is say no, and I'm a little more fearless than I was because I've done a couple of things, and anyway, I got this. It's a funny story. I got this gig with this band called the Screaming Jets, and they were from Australia. And it was with your buddy Mike Filoni called me.
Oh, really? Eh? Okay.
And said, "Hey, you want this job?" And I wasn't working. I was home, and phone rings, you take the job. So I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, this band. They're kind of like AC/DC. They're young. They're from Australia. They're coming over here, and they're gonna, try and break into America, and they're gonna do some shows around LA, and then do a little run around the US." And I said, "Sign me up." So I fly down to LA to do that gig. And, I meet everybody and we do like one rehearsal. And I get back to the hotel. And check in with the wife. This is before cell phones or anything. I think people had pagers at this point or something. But so I call home to my wife and, "Hey, how's it going?" "Yeah, LA's fine," and blah, 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 and just catch up. And she goes, "Bruce Allen's office called today." And I'm always kind of perked my interest because, that's where a lot of good jobs come from, right?
Yes, of course.
And I know they're not calling me to socialize. So I go, "Oh, really? Well, what did they say?" And they said that she goes, "Well, they were looking for a guitar tech for this job. Who I can't remember the name, but I told them you were in LA, that you were out of town." And I said, "Well, who was it for?" And she goes, I can't remember. She's thinking. She goes, "Jimmy Page." Is that right? I'm like, what? I'm like,
All right.
I think I dropped the phone, and I'm at a pay phone in the lobby of the Riot House in LA. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Yeah, they said that he was coming to Vancouver to make a record, and they were seeing if you were around. Are you checking your availability?" And I said, "What time did they call?" And they went, "Oh, they called at about 4:30 or whatever." And I know that office closes at 5, reception. And I thought, I was awake 2 hours before they opened, full of coffee, and standing at the payphone with ready to punch the last number at 9 a.m. when that office opened up again, which I did. And I talked to those guys the next morning, and I said, "Hey, I don't know what they told you, but I'm right here."
Hey, Charles, pull up that picture of Jim and Jimmy Page on the plane. I want to see that.
All right.
Yeah, it was right around
moment,
that
please.
time. So I call them up, and they go, "Oh, okay, so you are here, around." And I said, "Yeah, I just kind of got this little project that I'm doing, but I'm totally available." And then they said, "Well, Mr. Page his manager called us, and they're looking for somebody we can recommend. He's in between guitar techs, and we recommend you." And he goes, "Well, we recommend you." So I'm like, "Well, geez, I'm totally available." And they go, "Well, okay, I'm going to pass the information on to Jimmy's manager." So I get this call from, the UK of an English chap,
Wow.
I get, and I'm doing this all in the double secret because I don't want the band to find out that I'm talking to somebody else.
Of course.
And so I talked to Jimmy's manager. He goes, "Okay, you're hired," after we did a little phone interview. And so I basically, I gave the Screaming Jets their money back, and I gave them my buddy's phone number in LA. And I said, "Here's a guy that's completely capable for the gig. He's ready to go to work today. Here's your money for the plane ticket." and per diem, and I got to go.
Wow. Wow. So what
Did
was
they
your first?
understand?
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Did they understand the reason why you were leaving them to go to Jimmy?
Yes. I just said, hey, I got to go. And they all knew that I had to go, right?
Well, in all fairness, that actually gives them bragging rights.
Yeah, I mean,
because their crew guy just left and he works with Jimmy Page. That actually gives a band credibility they never had before.
It's a feather in their cap, and they got a great guy that I set him up with, who was there their entire run and worked with them afterwards, and it was a good fit. So anyway, I immediately got back to Vancouver. I had a couple of days to prepare for the sessions that we were doing at Little Mountain. His gear had been shipped over, and so I needed to get in there and open it all up and get it ready to record.
Right.
And
now, did you know Carter Sloan?
That name rings a bell.
Because Carter was Jimmy Page's. He was from Vancouver, I think.
Carter, yeah, he was his assistant / guitar tech kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. But he passed away.
Oh, I didn't know that. I remember him talking to Carter a couple of times. I think they were pretty good friends at one point, him and Jimmy.
Well, I know Carter. There was a period of time where because Carter got his start with Prism, and I happened to be working with John Hall doing some songwriting. And Carter had phoned John, and he was telling that he was in England and he was getting Jimmy Page's equipment together because there was so many amps and guitars that he'd lent out over the years. He didn't remember what he owned.
Right.
So he was trying to get it all back and number it and do serial. So yeah, so he was working on that for a couple of years, just getting Jimmy Page's stuff back. So I just wondered if you'd ever met him. So I guess not.
You know what? I never met him. We spoke on the phone a few times just about, gear and, stuff pertaining to Jimmy. But I never did meet him. So
this is Jimmy doing the album with, what's his name from Whitesnake, isn't it?
David Coverdale.
David Coverdale, yeah. Coverdale Page. And so at Little Mountain, so your first gig, so now you've been in the studio with Loverboy.
Yeah.
And Bob Rock, and now you're in the studio with Jimmy Page, the same studio.
Yeah, and Mike Fraser.
Yeah. Mike's going to be on this show too.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Today.
He's great. Yeah.
So we did a few months up in Vancouver at Little Mountain, because as we all know, that was where all the magic touch was happening right about then, and then they started going through some troubles with, politically and financially with the studio, and a bit of a takeover. And the artists thought that was a distraction. So we picked up and we went to Miami for like another 10 months to Criteria.
You went to Criteria. Now there's a famous studio.
Yeah, I've done a couple of records in there, but we did Criteria for like 10 more months with that record. And it was fantastic. And the record's gone platinum, and it's a great, super proud of it. Well,
Coverdale's such a great singer too. Good Lord.
Yeah, they did. The songwriting was good. The vibe was good, and we all had a laugh. It was a really memorable kind of time. But so I worked for him for that year, whatever, and then we did a press tour, and his personal assistant had left. So that was my first big league personal assistant job. So I flew out to LA with Jimmy, and we did the press tour for all of his interviews and any videos and everything pertaining to the release of the record. And so I was his guy out there for that, and a non-technical supporting role.
Which is essentially like a more focused road manager job almost. You're fielding everything, and
you're getting him around. He's not a guy who can just walk around by himself easily. So you're kind of a little bit of security. You're getting him to and from places. You're a logistics guy. You're driving him. You're doing anything he needs. Picking up the dry cleaning if necessary, whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
Getting him down to the video shoot.
We played the High Voltage Festival in London, England, and he wasn't supposed to be there. And it was weird because we had a trailer backstage, and there was a whole bunch of bands. Joe Elliott was there with his new band, and a bunch of people. Just, you know, Emerson, Lake and Palmer had reformed for this festival. It was quite an exciting backstage area. But I'm sort of getting ready to go on, and I look at the gate, and I say, that looks like Jimmy Page coming through the gate. And then I look back at our trailer, and now our trailer, one door says Bachman and Turner, and the other door says Jimmy Page. They just put this. I guess he'd given the call saying, I'm coming over, because he was going to produce Joe Elliott's new band. So he'd showed up. So we shared a dressing room.
Oh, excellent.
What I couldn't believe was how tall he was. I always thought it was a short guy. He's like at least 6 feet.
Yeah, he might have had some lifts or some heels on those boots. I never thought of him as a tall guy, but
well, he was tall, slim, and in really good shape when I saw him. I was really surprised at how good he looked.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Very considerate, epitome of an English gentleman. You know, and an interesting musician because, you know, incidentally he happens to be a guitarist, but I really think that he could have been in anything because his musical ability is his umbrella of oversight. He just sees the whole puzzle and how it fits together, and his oversight is as good as anything that he does, and I think that's what separates him from the pack.
Well, his producing was so great. I mean, that Led Zeppelin stuff was groundbreaking at the time. It still sounds amazing.
It still stands up, yeah.
It was absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. So Jimmy Page. So how long did that last?
We did about a year in the studio with him, and then we went out to LA and did the press tour for the record release, and then there was going to be a little bit of a quiet time before the live shows, and they had signed an agreement with Geffen to do X amount of live shows, and it wasn't a whole lot of live shows. They're going to go to Japan and do a handful of shows, and it wasn't going to be much. So I get back to Vancouver, and through the grapevine, I hear Aerosmith is coming to Little Mountain to record. So I grab the Pump record and I look on the back because there's no internet yet. And it says Collins Management, Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so I find their number and I call Collins Management in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I said, hey, now I'm all confident. I ain't scared of shit. So I call him up and I said, hey, Jim Survis here. I live in Vancouver, and rumors got it you guys are coming to town. And I just want to let you know I'm available for, you know, any kind of guitar tech or liaise to the city, or, you know, whatever you guys need, you know, anything. I'd be happy to assist you if you need any help in that department. And it was just some secretary at the management office, right? But she goes, okay, and she wrote my shit down. And I didn't think much of it, but I had to take a stab, right?
Right.
I'm going to take a stab. What's the worst thing that can happen? Nothing. So I took a stab, and a couple of weeks went by, and I'm sitting at home in Burnaby, where I used to live, by Burnaby Mountain, and the phone rings, and my wife picks it up, and she goes, "It's for you," you know, and I go and grab the phone, and it's Joe Perry, and so I'm like, you know, he's like, hey, the office, gave me your number and said you were going to be around or whatever, you know, and I'm like, yeah. So we start bullshitting, and he's asking about the Jimmy record went, and, you know, and he's a fan of Jimmy. He's a huge influence on him. And we bullshit for like 10 minutes. And he goes, well, if you want a job, I'm coming to Vancouver. And I need somebody temporarily. They always say temporarily in case you're a flake. Right. And so he hired me. He goes, my office will call you tomorrow. and work out the details. So they called me, and I got the damn job that I kept for 18 years.
Wow. Scott has a question for you.
Yeah.
So Jim, did you find, I guess, this big transition now when you went to Jimmy, is that the big door opener for you? Like give you the real street cred to take it to the high level?
That street cred is still lasting today.
Yeah.
I believe. It's just that there's only a handful of guys ever to exist that have that kind of cred. And I got lucky to be able to work with a guy and have an association with him. And we're still friends. I also did the Black Crowes Jimmy Page tour. So we were able to work together again later when I was with the Crowes. And we bump into each other here and there in an award show or a Hall of Fame ceremony or something. And it's still warm and friendly. And yeah, that was, but some of those other smaller gigs, like the Bryan Adams gig when I got it, was kind of, in my mind, kind of opened up, maybe took off some of the chains that I had self-imposed on myself.
Well, yeah, because so much with going through the Bruce Allen office, like you were saying, and Jody Perpick, of course, he was helping you, and he was making his way through the ranks, giving you good word,
Yeah.
And then Bruce is, of course, now Bruce is managing Bob Rock. Bob Rock is in the studio with these guys.
Yeah.
So
I got a good rapport with Rock and later Fairburn. But yeah, it was, it all worked out pretty good.
Thanks for joining us. Check out our many other episodes and vignettes for more great content. And please like, share, and subscribe, and become a member at SocialNRGPresents.com to access all our content and earn valuable energy points just for watching.